In this lecture, let's learn about custom hooks in React, and I assure you that this would be one of the most simplest lecture on hooks you would watch in your entire life. So till now, we have learned about the built-in hooks like the useState hook and the useReducer hook, but we could also create our very own hooks in React as well, and they are called as custom hooks. Now the concept of hooks seems a lot more complicated, but hooks are actually just simple functions, and many people tend to overcomplicate hooks while teaching in tutorials or while trying to understand them. So let's go ahead and let's create a very basic and simple hook at first, and then let's build on top of it. So let's say you want to create a simple hook that would display some message onto the console. So in order to create a hook, you simply have to go ahead and create a file first. Now you could create that file anywhere, but as per the convention, it's actually better if you create a hooks folder in your source folder. So go inside the source folder, create a new folder here called as hooks. And we are going to be creating a hook in this hooks folder. So I'll go ahead, create a new file. And as we want to create a hook which displays a message, so any hook which you create or any hook which you use, that hook is usually named as useState, useReducer. So you basically have use and then the name of that hook. So let's call this hook as useDisplayMessage.js. And remember that you need to use a .js extension while creating this hook. Alright, so once this file is created, now we could go ahead and start writing our code here. So obviously, the very first thing which you need to do over here is that just as with any component, you first say export default function use display message. So nothing new in there. We have simply created and exported a function, and we have used the same name as the name of our file here. Now, as I earlier mentioned, a hook is nothing but it's simply a function. So let's create a regular JavaScript function in here. So I would say function, and as we want to create a function that would display a message, let's simply call it as display message. And the job of this function is to display a message to the console. So I would simply write a console.log statement here, which would say this is a message, and that's it. And now as this useDisplayMessage is a hook, what we wish to do is we wish to return this particular function itself over here. So over here, I would say, all right, I would return the function itself. And as I want to return a function here, what I would do is I'll actually create an array here and then return a display message. And that's it. So till this point in this particular file, there's nothing related to React, but it's simply a JavaScript function. So we actually have a function defined inside other function, and then we are returning the inner function inside this outer function. And we are enclosing this particular function inside an array. Alright, so now our hook is created. Now let's go ahead and let's learn how exactly we could use this particular hook. So let's say you want to use this hook inside your app.jsx file directly. So I would go in there, and what I would do is I would say, alright, I want to use this display message function. Therefore, I'll actually go ahead and make use of the useDisplayMessage hook. So in case of useState, what we do is you type in useState here, and then you actually go ahead and get the state over here. So you say state equals useState. So we have to do something similar in case of the useDisplayMessage as well. So over here, the useDisplayMessage hook actually returns this displayMessage function. So over here, I have to say const displayMessage. And I want to get this particular function from the useDisplayMessage hook. So as soon as I type this thing in, as you can see, that particular useDisplayMessage hook is automatically imported from our hooks directory. So I'll get rid of this state from here. So as this displayMessage is actually a function, I just need to call this function and see if that works. So you obviously cannot call it inside the return statement. Therefore, I'll call this function here. So I would say display message, and that's it. Now, if I save this code and if I go back here, go to the console, as you can see, when we refresh the page, we get this is a message up over here in the console. That means this function is being called. And we actually get this twice because we are using React in safe mode and it actually renders our component twice. Therefore, we are getting this twice up over here. So this was one of the simplest way of creating a hook in React. And all we had done is we had created a hooks folder. Inside the hooks folder, we had created a file in which our hook actually exists. So we have named this particular hook as useDisplayMessage hook. And once that hook was created, we simply created a function inside it. So this useDisplayMessage hook contained a function called as a displayMessage. And once that function was defined, we simply returned that particular function as displayMessage. Now, as this is a function, you cannot directly return it. Therefore, I have actually wrapped it inside an array. And the reason for wrapping it inside an array is because let's suppose I also have another function here. I could pass that function up over here and return them both using the return statement. Now, once this function was returned, all I had to do is I had to simply go ahead, get that particular function from the hook. So we have imported the hook first, and then we have used that particular function up over here and then call that function up over here. So this was the most simplest example of hook in React. And once you understand this, you can now build any kind of complex hook in React. So now let's go ahead and let's build on top of this. So let's go ahead and let's modify this function which we have. So instead of console logging a message to the console, let's say we instead want to return this particular message like this is a message. So I would say, all right, this function returns a string called as this is a message. So now what we have to do is when we have called this particular function inside our app.jsx, we have to modify the behavior of this particular function. So this function now does not print anything to the console, but it simply returns this string. So let's capture that string inside a message variable. So I would say const message equals this. So when this function is called, this string would be returned, which would in turn be saved into this message variable right up over here. Now let's return this particular message onto our page. So over here, I would say message is, and then display the message, and that's it. Now if I go back here, as you can see, it says this is a message. Now this is all fine and good, but if you go back to our hook here, it kind of makes no sense to have this message up over here inside a string. So instead of returning this, let's say we actually save this particular string into some sort of a state. Therefore, inside this hook itself, that is in our custom hook, I'll make use of the useState hook to save this particular string. So here I would say use state. So I'll create a state, and whenever we use a useState function or a useState hook, we actually have the state as well as the function to set that state. So in this case, as I want to set the message, so I would say message and the set message function equals useState. And let's take out this value from here. So I'll comment this out and I will take up this string and I will now pass this particular string as the initial state up over here. And now what I could do is I could return this particular message directly up over here. So I could directly say, all right, over here, I want to take this message and make the useDisplayMessage hook return a message. So over here, I would say, I would simply return the message. So once you have returned this particular message, now I would go back here to the app.jsx. And now we cannot actually go ahead and call this particular function because we have nuked it. So let's get rid of that. And up over here from the useDisplayMessage hook, now we are expecting a message. So here instead of display message, I would say, all right, I want to get the message here. And if I save this, go back here, as you can see, we are getting an error here because useState was not defined. So in this particular function, as we are using the useState hook, you also need to import it. So I would simply go ahead and import useState from React. As soon as I do that, the error disappears and we have a message up over here. So what we have essentially done here is that initially we were actually returning a function inside our hook, but right now we are not returning a function, but instead we are now actually returning a value. Now let's say you want to return both the value as well as the function. In that particular case, the only thing which you have to do is you have to pass in that particular function up over here as well. So let's make this function console log something. So I'll say console.log and I would say something like this is a message from display message. And right now, let me go ahead and return the message which contains a value, and then also return the display message function as well. So I would say display message. So in this case, we are returning two things from our hook. First is the value which is stored inside our state. The next is a function itself. So both of them are being returned up over here. So then I need to go ahead and fetch them both up over here as well in this particular order. So message and display message. So I would say message, comma, display message. So we are already using the message here, and now I simply need to use that particular display message function. So I'll simply call that function up over here. So if I do that, and if I save this code, go back here, as you can see, the message is being passed over here to the app component, and the app component is also running the display message function as well. So this is how you could go ahead and create your very own hook in React, and this is one of the simplest examples of creating your own custom hook. So I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, then please make sure that you hit the like button and click the subscribe button as well. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.